What's up everyone, Dave Atkinson here, and I want to give you guys 4 tips that any drummer can do to make their drumming sound better. Now, being a community manager for Drumeo Edge, I do a lot of student reviews, and that's where a drummer will submit their video and I give feedback on their playing and advice and tips to sound better. And the one thing I see all the time is drummers focus too much on what they're playing and not enough on how they're playing it. And at the end of the day, the studios, the bands, the people who hire you don't necessarily hire you for what you can play, but how you sound in the end. Now, with all these tips, it's going to require you to take a step back and look at how you're playing your beats. If you have to, record with an iPhone, with a camera, maybe you have an electronic set. Find a way to record your grooves so you can listen back or watch yourself playing them. This is a great way to take these 4 tips that I'm about to give you and apply them to your playing. Now, tip number 1 is timing. Make sure you're playing in time. Now, this might seem obvious for a lot of you guys. If your timing isn't good, your groove's going to suck. It makes sense. But I'm not talking about just overall timing with your phrasing. I'm talking about your timing with every single note you play. Go back and listen to the groove you're playing. Is your snare drum flamming with your hi-hats? Is your bass drum flamming with your hi-hats? A lot of times drummers will play a groove, they'll play all the right notes in the actual bar, but their timing on the individual notes is a little bit off, and it'll cause some flamming issues, and it'll take you away from the groove. Here's an example of what I mean, and something that you can look out for in your own playing. So I was playing the right pattern, I was playing the right amount of notes in the bar, but my hi-hat was not lining up with my snare, my bass drum was not lining up with my hi-hats, and the timing was terrible. So, first off, check to see if your overall groove is in time. Are you crashing into the 1? Are you having to speed up? Are you having to slow down in order to get back to that 1? Or are your notes not landing at the same time? That flam issue can be the world of difference when it comes to a good sounding groove and a bad sounding groove. All right, now tip number 2 is note spacing. Go back and see if the notes you are playing are spaced correctly apart. Now, I know some of you guys might think, well, isn't that similar to timing? And they do share a lot of similarities. But what I'm talking about here is the pattern you're playing has to feel right. If you're playing a shuffle and you're wanting to play swung notes on your hi-hat, if that note spacing isn't there, it's going to sound terrible. Here's what I mean. Now again, I was playing all the right notes, but they weren't spaced the correct distance apart. Going back, checking what you just played, and correcting that note spacing issue on the hi-hats will make a world of difference. Here's that basic shuffle pattern with the correct note spacing with the hi-hats. So I'm sure you heard a huge difference there, and all I was doing was tightening up the space between each hi-hat note. So you got your timing, making sure that your notes aren't flamming. You got your note spacing, making sure everything's fit in the right spot within that bar. Now, number 3 is dynamics. And again, this might seem obvious for a lot of you drummers, but you'd be surprised how many videos I've seen of drummers playing where either they're too heavy on the kick drum, their snare isn't poking through, or they're just digging into their hi-hats, or they're playing so quietly that you can't even really hear the beat at all. Now, what you want to do is play a groove, go back and listen to it, and see if anything stands out or if you can't hear anything. A lot of times you might have a really heavy bass drum, or you might be overdoing it with the hi-hats. It's really important to be able to individually mix each instrument with each other so that the overall sound is complete. Now, one really good check pattern for this, if you're not sure, take away one of your limbs. If you think your bass drum is too loud, maybe you take away your hi-hat and hear it in context with your snare. If you think your hi-hats are too loud, take away your snare and hear it in context with your bass drum. Something like this. By doing things like that, you can hear easily how each voice relates to each other. And one more great exercise for working on your dynamics is to purposefully take the volume up and down of each individual limb. While you're playing the groove, start with your hi-hats, play them really loud, then play them quiet. Play your snare really loud, then play it quiet. Try to build that control of your internal dynamics. Something like this. So once you've got your dynamics down, it's time to move on to the last point, which is consistency within your phrasing. Now, a lot of beginner drummers will play a groove, and then the next bar play something a little bit different, and then the third bar play something even different to that, and it's confusing for the listener to grasp. A huge part of groove is predictability, and the audience wants to feel comfortable with what you're playing. If you're not even comfortable with what you're playing and playing something different every time, how is the listener going to grab a hold to that? So what you could do is start with 2, 4, or 8 bar phrases that give your audience something that they can easily grasp onto. So to demonstrate this, let me play you a 4-bar phrase, one that's completely random and one that's consistent, and you tell me which one sounds better to you. So I hope you heard the difference between those two. And take consistency a little bit further than that. Make sure you're consistent with your timing, make sure you're consistent with your note spacing, your dynamics, and your phrasing. You want to make your grooves feel great, and that's how you do it. So there you have it, 4 simple ways to make anything you play sound a lot better. And again, thanks for watching, guys. My name's Dave Atkinson, the community manager for Drumeo Edge, where we hang out, talk drums, teach lessons all day. If you want to hear more about what Drumeo is about, check out the link below this video. See you around.